companies. It's been relatively empty for the last 18 months for the obvious reason. But yeah, we've launched a lot of businesses through that. Some famous ones in town that have well outgrown Menlo. Companies like Sky Specs and Torrent Consulting and Parabricks and yeah, I'm trying to think. Kamanu, Vic Strecker's company, started here.
What about Jen Baird?
Yep, Jen Baird and Fifth Eye. Yep, they were in the startup garage for quite a while, and we have a permanent tenant in the eLab Ventures venture capital firm. Doug Neal and Paul Brown, two of the managing partners of that.
I have to give a shout out. I think is Rick, Dick, are you there? Maybe I lost Dick Root. Dick, are you there? Oh, okay, well, maybe he'll come back on. This is the person I've probably known longest because he's a high school mate. So from the talking to us, but he's not here right now. Dick, one more call. No, don't look. DeVoe, I'm going to call on you to say hi. You got a camera?
I do.
All right, let's see your shining smile then. Don't see it right now.
It's not cooperating.
Oh,
anyway,
no.
Sorry, you just had to be audio.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm good. You want to just give us a shout? I want to congratulate you, DeVoe, for an award you got. You want to tell us what that was?
Yeah, just real quick, our company, Gasser Bush Associates, got the a Free Press Top Places Work Award. This is for 2021, and I think what's personal for me is that I worked really hard to try to improve the culture and work with the leaders to be a lot of things I learned from this group, honestly, to kind of up their game as we grew as a company and make it a better place. And this is an anonymous survey from all employees, so there's no place to hide. And so if you hit a certain number, you get the award. But what's really important is people were very honest about comments they made and felt comfortable. Obviously, it's anonymous, but still making comments both positive and negative. And we're using that to, improve what we do. Probably the biggest part, and I'm sure everybody's kind of facing this, is, how do you provide a good path for growth for people, especially in a company where, we're a small company of 60. We don't have a very definitive vertical ladder. So how do you create that opportunity kind of laterally and just make it better? So I was credited by the CEO of, being integral to doing that. And I'm really, it's a great people we have.
Somebody's got their phone. Could you mute everybody? Megan, thank you. Yeah, somebody. So just unmute Rich. I think that's the best one. So Rich, we should probably get rolling here. I'm sure you see a lot of familiar faces on there. Here, it's kind of hard to follow who's on there and talk at the same time, but I want to say hi to everybody. And it's good to be back after a little delay from the last month or so. And Rich, you mentioned Sky Specs. I just want to shout out to that because that's a very fast growing company. And we've invested so much in it that Rich and I both have our children working there. Well, I guess our kids, they're not children anymore. And my son, Dan, is there, and your daughter, Lauren.
Lauren, yep.
Yeah, so, and Lauren worked for me for a summer. So it's really exciting to see all the young people coming on board.
All of my daughters worked for you for a summer, Rob, at one time or another.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna kick off. I don't need probably to introduce Rich, but just from a personal point of view, I met Rich a good 20-some years ago, and I forget, maybe Kathy McDonald introduced us, but I used to have an office right across the street from you, and we'd go often for coffee. And at that point, Rich was talking about starting a new company and being fed up with being in other people's companies and having things not exactly the way he wanted to have them in terms of how software was being developed. So he told me he was starting this, and then lo and behold, we got a picture of him, and I looked at a magazine called Forbes, and there was Rich's face on the cover. Now, I've been in business for 20 years before that. I never had my picture on any cover. So it was in a few posts office, but that was the best I could do. So since then, Rich has been a really great leader in town. He's led Menlo, and your partner, say your partner, Rich.
James Goebel. James Goebel.
So Rich and James, and I think you had a few other people when you started. So it was a great launch, and really focusing on a certain way of developing software, which we sometimes call lean. But it's a really unique way. And I'm kind of interested in how you do this now, since people can't be sitting next to each other so easily. So that's a transition. And today, Rich is going to talk about his books, but also he's going to be talking about the changes in the workplace and what the future is of a workplace. And there's been a lot of books and podcasts and whatever, people are speculating on that. So, and I want to say one thing Rich and I did, it was about 1990 or maybe 2002, something like that, with Kathy McDonald. We had a program called Michigan Leaders Read. And the first book we picked was Good to Great. And we had everybody read it, and then we did a workshop about it. And 20 years later, we're going to bring this back, and we're going to use this book. I don't know if you can all see it. It's called Chief Joy Officer. You want to tell us a little bit about this, Rich?
Sure. Yeah, this is my second book. And the first book was called Joy Inc., How We Built the Workplace People Love. And that book really detailed the culture and the practices that underpin it here at Menlo. Chief Joy Officer is more about what I call the more invisible part of Menlo. What does the leadership constructs at Menlo look like, especially in a place where we have no bosses? There's no hierarchy here. So how does leadership work when you have a non-hierarchical company? And that is central, and the subtitle is probably important to note, how great leaders elevate human energy and eliminate fear. That's
great. Great subtitle. I like that. Fear is a big negative driver in the workplace, but I guess the absence of fear then becomes a reinforcement, according to B.F. Skinner, who I actually had as a teacher one time.
Wow.
So, at Harvard. So that was pretty cool. But Rich, we're going to have people read this. Can you say where they can find it?
Yeah, it's available wherever you like to find books. If you like audiobooks, the good news, if you like my voice, I got to read this one. And I'm delighted to have had Tom Peters, famous for In Search of Excellence, write the foreword. And Tom even read the foreword in the audiobook, which was just a pure delight. If you know Tom, he's a wonderful human being and has a lot of opinions about business that are contrary to the way most businesses work.
I had the pleasure of meeting him at one of your events a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Yeah, very, very interesting speaker. And Rich, we're going to have this book, post it, and you could post it, Rich, and it'll be the Michigan Leaders Read. So we encourage everybody who is a leader or considers themselves a leader, or you could hand it to your boss, whoever, as a Christmas gift. And the idea is we'll all read it, and then in March, Rich and I will get back together again, and we'll have hopefully it'll be a live workshop, but at least it'll be a Zoom, if not live, and we'll be digging into the book, and people could work in small groups to talk about it. And so that'll be the event for the March, and we'll bring back Michigan Leaders Read and really try to find other books, hopefully by Michigan authors. And I would also say, if you're going to read this book and buy it, try to buy it locally. Literati is place of one of our sponsors. There's also a bookstore called Nicola's up at Maple. It's at Stadium, Westgate Shopping Center. And they're Grand Rapids local and Ann Arbor. So if you're going to buy it, buy it through there. They do have mail orders, so it's just as effective as Amazon if you could go through the process. So we support local people. And Rich, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the topic. And we're going to go for about 30 minutes and then break into small groups for a few minutes, and you could discuss what Rich is talking about and maybe come up with some questions for him. So take it away, Rich.
Yeah. Those of you who might know the history of Menlo might wonder what has happened since the pandemic, because that was a traumatic change for us and a dramatic change for us. I'll just kind of recap history of Menlo. delighted to say we celebrated our 20th birthday this June, which I think by all measures is a good accomplishment for any company. It felt particularly meaningful given the last 18 months. That we actually made it to our 20th birthday seems a little bit miraculous. For our first 18 and a half years, what I will call traditional Menlo, we worked in spaces like the one behind me here. I'm actually in the office today, and we're here in downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan. We've got about a 24,000 square foot facility here that stretches from Liberty to Washington, and one big open room. No walls, offices, cubes, or doors. We have some glass walls for conference rooms, for quiet, for events like this. And we all work shoulder to shoulder in this room. 2 people, 1 computer, sharing a keyboard and a mouse. This idea of working in pairs is not a construct invented by Menlo, but we've probably made it pretty famous given we've been doing it this way for 20 years. And the pairs are assigned and we switch them every 5 working days. So the human energy that results from that kind of construct is palpable. When we would typically get 3,000 to 4,000 people a year who travel from all over the world just to come see how all this works and understand the effect it has on the work that we do, which is designing and developing custom software for our clients. And then, of course, that week of March 16th of 2020, it was like a fire drill. Get out of the building, get out as quick as you can, grab as much equipment as you need, go home, set up your home office, and we'll figure it out from there. And we did. A lot of people wondered, what does pairing look like? In fact, Rob, if I can, I'm going to share a screen here. If I don't know if Megan can allow that to happen. I can show you what some things look like because we've had to make some big adjustments here. So much of the last 18 months was what I call pandemic Menlo, which was how did we figure out how to work apart from one another? And the way I describe it is that, yes, we had to embrace physical distancing for health and safety reasons, but we completely rejected the idea of social distancing. We do not need to be apart socially, even if we're apart physically. I would say that this event here is a good example of that. We can declare it's not ideal, and we would love to be together and shaking hands and having a coffee together and that sort of thing, but we can still make it work. So let me just give you a little peek inside of Menlo here. So the thing that fascinated people about us is this construct. This is what, for example, 2 of our programmers working together, this is Ian and Ben, 2, I would say, very introverted programmers working shoulder to shoulder, side by side, all day long, sharing a keyboard and a mouse, collaborating to solve a problem together. Their peers are nearby, so we work in this big open room. There's no space police to mind the tables or anything. So the team has chosen for all the years to put the tables front to front, side to side, so that their peers are nearby and can join in discussions when they need a little extra help. And everybody wondered when we went to pandemic Menlo, how does this part work? Well, not too difficult to imagine, I suppose, but this is what remote pairing looks like. I think the cats have an important role to play in this. This is Sarah and Ethan. The code they're co-developing is on the left-hand screen. Their pair partner's on the right-hand screen. This is our daily stand-up meeting that they're attending. And this construct happens all day, every day. The pairs, again, are assigned, and we switch them at least every 5 working days. So Sarah and Ethan are working together this week. They won't be working together again next week. They'll cycle back again together at some point in time. But this construct allowed us to do the same kind of work in the same way, the same basic practice of pairing, which has some really important implications for quality and speed, all that sort of thing. And this is them joining a couple of their peers, Helen and Nicole, who they needed some help from. So they went out and grabbed them, brought them in. So we were able to keep the basic principles of teamwork and collaboration and trust and relationship and human energy alive, even as we switched to pandemic Menlo. And the cat clearly has a role. We haven't quite figured out what it is, but we think the cat's doing some final quality checks on the code here. So
can I ask you to maybe elaborate on what result does this bring compared to traditional software development?
Yeah, you know, if somebody had asked me, Rob, at the beginning of Menlo, what I was trying to accomplish, I often use the analogy of the Wright Brothers when they first got off the ground in, you know, controlled manned-powered flight in 1903. And Orville was actually interviewed.
Rich was there for that flight.
Well, so. Rob, I remember seeing you there too.
Yeah.
There was. Orville was interviewed shortly after that flight. And he said, at most, we would be able to carry 2 passengers. That's it. Don't get too excited. The weight of the people, the amount of fuel required, the power of the engine, the weight of the engine to produce that power, never be able to carry more than 2. And interestingly, I read that story on a flight to London in a 747 in a book about his life. So clearly there are opportunities in front of all of us that probably look like that. If you'd asked me back 20 years ago, Rob, what would I want to accomplish with what we were doing at Menlo? I probably would have said 2 emergencies. If I could get our efforts to the point where we would produce only 2 software emergencies per week, I would have been happy, because my life before that was filled with chaos. There were firefights everywhere because we were producing emergencies per hour in the work we used to work. And if somebody had pressed me, I'd say, I think we could get it down to 2 a week. And if somebody had said, hey, Rich, I think you should set your sights a little higher, maybe 2 a quarter, maybe 2 a year. What do you think? And I'd be like, come on, this is software. You got to be kidding me. Well, I'm happy to report, Rob, after 20 years, 2 software emergencies in 20 years. That's the equivalent for me of that 747 with 500 passengers and 50,000 gallons of fuel flying at 35,000 feet at 500 miles an hour. I would have never believed that was possible. And yet, so the quality impact of 2 people working together, and there's a lot of people who understand, for instance, Six Sigma thinking, that can exactly explain why having 2 people working together side by side and then switching those pairs every 5 days produces that effect. The other part is keeping the human energy of our team high. Programming can be a long, tiring, isolated, lonely kind of activity, not in our world. And it allows us to scale teams up without overtime. And that's a tradition of our industry. You know, the 24/7 death marches of the software industry are famous. We have none of those. We've never worked overtime in 20 years. Now, that's a little bit of hyperbole, but the overtime we work might be 45 hours, not the 60, 70, and 80 hours that most software teams work. Our fundamental belief is that tired people make bad software, and we're not going to have tired people. So we have created a culture that allows us to, if we need to get more done, we can add more people, and the pairing construct allows us to do that. And one of the biggest challenges in software is this idea of a tower of knowledge problem, where there's one person on your team that knows everything about a particular part of a system, and nobody else knows what they know. The only way to scale a hero-based system is to scale the heroes. The only way to scale the heroes is overtime.
It's great. And I know that it also results in far fewer user errors, because there's not just one person who's the expert, but several people. And they can notice that I don't know what the hell is how to use this piece, and they fix it before you have to call the helpline. So
yeah, and we've created a whole separate practice called high-tech anthropology that is about ensuring that we delight the people who will one day use the software. So we apply anthropological thinking to understanding the users that we're going to serve, so that in fact, by the time we get done building the software, the people who are going to use it have been so well understood. They actually use it without user manuals, help text, or training classes or support lines, because we taught the computer how to think like the people who are going to use it, rather than try and teach the people how to think like a computer.
Well, Rich, how does all this flow into what you see as the workplace of the future?
Well, you know, we learned a lot of lessons in the last 18 months, Rob, and we are now well into what I call the third version of Menlo, which I've affectionately dubbed emerging Menlo. So there was original Menlo, working in one big open room, shoulder to shoulder, pandemic Menlo, we were all at home. And now emerging Menlo, which is my clever way of saying, I have no idea what's coming next. And, but what we're seeing, Rob, is, and what I have personally learned, is that the workplace of the future is going to be a much more flexible workplace than it's ever been before. You know, we have team members that live quite a distance from the office. And when there were snow days, when there was a child that needed care at home from a parent, people were taking PTO days to cover those. Now we just tell them work from home. We hired a young man from Grand Rapids, Andy, and he asked us, he said, hey, my lease doesn't run out in my Grand Rapids apartment until March. Can I stay living here until then? We said, of course, Andy. As we got closer and closer to March, we asked him what his plans were. Was he getting ready to move to Ann Arbor? And there was this pause and a worried look on his face. And we said, what's going on, Andy? He says, well, got this really serious girlfriend here in Grand Rapids. And we looked at him and we said, Andy, just stay in Grand Rapids. No need to move. And a tremendous amount of relief on that young man's face. And I would guess we probably retained him from that simple move. Now, he's been here. We've invited him to Ann Arbor to spend time in our office just to get to know us and be part of put him up in a hotel for a week. And, and so I think this idea of where can we work is a really important one. I know I've taken advantage of it. During the pandemic, Carol and I, my wife and I, rented a motorhome because that's a really safe hotel room in a pandemic. And we drove up to the UP. But while on the shores of Lake Huron, I had to give a talk to 50 people in Berlin. I did it from the dining set of that motorhome, using my cell phone as a Wi-Fi signal. And successfully delivered a keynote from the shores of Lake Huron. And I thought, wow, this is kind of a cool life. Maybe I should just buy a motorhome and become a nomadic CEO and travel the country. So I think the amount of flexibility that exists, Rob, and our understanding that we should maintain that flexibility going forward. Just had a talk with one of the members of our team who has not been in the office since the pandemic started. He's very concerned about the pandemic. He's got some people in his life that he wants to make sure he doesn't infect. And, but we asked him, what are you thinking? How are you doing? We were checking in on his mental health as well, because he's been isolated for all this time. And he said he misses the camaraderie of Menlo. He wants to be back in the office someday, but he also appreciates, because he lives about a 40-minute drive from here, that there will be days that he will easily be able to work from home. And he appreciates that kind of flexibility. So I think those are some of the constructs that, that we can all consider as leaders in terms of what are we going to do when we emerge from this pandemic, and who knows how long that's going to take. I don't know about you guys. I thought the pandemic would last for about 8 weeks and then we'd be back. It won't even be done 8 weeks from now. And we're almost 2 years into this thing.
What do you see as the major challenges to the workplace of the future? If it's more flexible, what's going to be the challenges for the leaders in that regard?
Well,
by the way, if you have a question, please post it on chat. We can try to manage a couple of those before we break out.
If it was just the pandemic we were going through, Rob, that would be one thing. But there's just been this series of things we've gone through societally since then. There was an economic crisis that occurred right when the pandemic hit. Thank God for PPP loans. There was the social justice crises that have been roiling our nation for a good amount of time now. And then there was the grand resignation, or the great resignation, however you refer to it, where suddenly people were just like, I'm fed up, I'm leaving, I'm going somewhere else. And all of those things, every company has had to face and deal with, and we're no different in that regard. And so I think the challenges that we face as top leaders in an organization are increase our listening skills, hear what people are really doing, learning how to bring them in to the decision-making that's happening within the company. Our good friend Ari Weinswag and the Zingerman's crew has taught us.
Right there, that's one of our sponsors. I should pull up my shirt and wearing one of the Zingerman shirts.
Excellent. Good advertising. You know, they've taught us how to do open book financing. We've probably taken it a little bit further. We're open book with all of our compensation. So everybody at Menlo knows what everybody else is making. And the only way you get raises here is through peer evaluation. And so I think getting people involved in all of the decision making that runs the company is an important construct, because people want to feel like they have a connection, a deep connection to the place they work. Because right now, and here's the reality, all of your employees, if you have them, can be at a new employer with a simple click of a button on Monday morning. They don't have to move. They don't have to uproot their lives. They don't have to pull their kids out of school. They don't have to ask their spouse to find another job. They don't have to buy a house in another city. Friday, they can click one link and be at your office, and Monday morning, they can click another link and be at another office. And that's just a fundamental truth. We need to build organizations where people are wanting to come to our organization rather than go to the next one. We have to build organizations where people want to stay in the company that we've built.
Matt has a question for you. I think it's a great one. Matt, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and ask the question? Megan, you could unmute Matt, or Matt, you could unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me, Rob?
Yes.
Thanks for taking my question. I was just zeroing in on the title of your book, The Chief Joy Officer, and you've touched on a number of novel things that you do at Menlo, but how do you, I guess, fundamentally bring joy to the workplace per your title, The Chief Joy Officer? And is it myriad things, or do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, I use a simple, thanks, Matt. I use a simple construct to consider how to design an organization, much like you would design an airplane. If you think about the forces that work on an airplane, even if you don't have a pilot's license like I do, you know that there is the force of lift that pulls the plane off the ground, the force of weight that tries to pull it back down. So there's got to be more lift than weight, or that aircraft won't get off the ground. There's a force of thrust that pulls it forward, and a force of drag that's trying to hold it back. Same kind of forces that work on a human organization. The lift of human energy, probably one of the most squandered energy forces on the planet. You think about the 60 to 70% of people who are disengaged at work, according to the Gallup survey that's been going on for 50 years. That is a tremendous waste of human energy when people are coming to work and they just don't care what happens that day at work. Their mind is elsewhere. So as leaders, we need to construct organizations that actually lift the human energy of our team. You know, I'll offer up a couple of things we do here. Number one, high on our list is clarity. A lot of people live in a sea of ambiguity at work. They walk in the door on Monday morning, they have no idea what they should be working on. They're allocated by percentages. They're 20% on project A, they're 50% on project B, they're 30% on project C, they're 30% on project D. And they have no idea where they should start their day, when they should switch to the next project or everything or anything. And here we are completely clear what you're working on, who you're working with. You work on one thing at a time, you work on it till it's done. And I think that's an important other construct within human energy. And that is give people the ability to go to work and actually get meaningful things done, really done. There is no greater feeling. If any of you are like me, if you're a checklist-oriented person, you know, if I have 10 things to do in the weekend, and I've already gotten 3 of them done, I'm going to write down all 10 just so I have the satisfaction of crossing off the first 3 on the list, because it feels so good. We need those kind of feelings at work as well. The weight that holds us down, meeting load, bureaucracy. You know, I talk to a lot of large organizations, and there are literally people with some level of management and above who are human sacrifices to meetings. If you want to suck the human energy out of an organization, there's a simple 3-step process to do it. Number 1, have lots of meetings. Number 2, do not make any decisions in those meetings. And number 3, if perchance by mistake you just happen to make a decision, that's okay. Just don't act on it. And you will pull all of the human energy out of your organization. The thrust that pulls us forward is the thrust of an externally focused purpose. Every organization should be able to answer two simple questions. Who do you serve? And what would delight look like for them? And when I give people that homework assignment for their own businesses, I take their standard stakeholders off the table. Don't tell me about your customers, your employees, your shareholders. Of course you have to serve them, but that's still self-serving. The kind of purpose that pulls an organization through tough times is one that focuses outside of the normal stakeholders, beyond them. What kind of difference are you going to make in the world? And then the drag that holds us back is as old as organizational history, the drag of fear. I will tell you, I was taught to lead with fear. You know, my now good friend Tom Peters has this construct called management by walking around. But I had a boss who extended that one to management by walking around and annoying people. Hey, how's it going? What you working on? Are you coming in this weekend? You know, it's like, go away, leave me alone. This is not helpful. And so I think if you think about your own organization, Matt, and think about those four forces, what can we do to lift human energy? What can we do to reduce bureaucracy? What do we make sure we're doing to keep our team focused on a worthy purpose? And I would declare that storytelling, one of my subtitles is chief storyteller, and make sure, and this has to start with the top leaders, make sure we're pumping fear out of the room, because fear doesn't make bad news go away. Fear makes bad news go into hiding.
That's a great answer. Thank you. And I think you exude that. I don't know. I have never seen you really get angry.
Yeah, you haven't seen me in all circumstances.
Yeah, Carol. I asked Carol, Rich's wife. Maybe
she's actually told me that. She's like, I've never seen you angry either. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna hide it well then.
You're still married. That's pretty cool.
That's true. 42 years she's put up with me.
Rich, I have to come to your house and get a few personal lessons. That I tend to not have a long fuse on myself, but it's not helpful. But Rich, we're going to break into small groups because rather than have people individually ask questions, we're going to have you all magically go into groups of three. And my new assistant, Megan DeVries, will be taking us there. It's a different planet, so you may not know where you are. It's called Station 11, so just hold on. And you can talk to each other and face this question about what have you learned from Rich, and what might you want to think about in terms of the workplace of the future, or anything else that Rich has talked about. So please introduce yourselves. This is the networking part of the Leaders Connect. This is the connecting part. It's how I've adapted to the wanting to do the coffee where everybody's crowded into Zingerman's. You can't move, but you can talk to people. So anyway, let's take it away, Megan, and we'll cut. You have 7 minutes, so it's got to be pretty quick, and introduce yourself, and hopefully come back with a question for Rich. We won't be able to cover all of them, but we'll get to the ones we can. All right, hold.
Hello.
So I was in a breakout room all by myself, which is pretty boring. So I came back.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll move you to a different breakout room if that's okay with you.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Eric. I'm having some issues on my end.
No
Reassigning.
worries. Perhaps I'm fated to just not be in a small group today.
Yeah, I feel awful. I'm sorry. It's because when the new people come, then it lets me automatically assign them. But since you were already in one, then you left, it's not letting me assign you to a new one, which is very odd.
Hi.
Hi. I say we can make our own breakout room.
I was in a breakout room with somebody and I got disconnected and we were chatting. I don't know if I can get back to the same person, but I forgot her name too.
Okay. I say, do you remember which room you were in, or?
It was just me and one other person. She was oh geez, I forgot her name. I was driving and I didn't get it, but she might be by herself if she was the only, because it was just two of us. But you can't find it. It's fine.
Was it Diana?
She said she's been doing it for 20 years. Could be.
Okay, I'll try to put you back in there.
All right. Thank you.
Rich, are you back?
We are back.
All right. Do you want to talk about what question came out of your group?
Well, there's a lot of consternation right now, Rob, about compensation, employee retention, keeping employees engaged, onboarding new talent, keeping them after you onboard them, that sort of thing. And, I think that's a common theme. I talk to a lot of companies around the country right now. There's one manufacturer we've worked with for a long time. They can't keep new people more than 10 weeks, and those people just literally stop showing up to work. They join, they get onboarded, 10 weeks later, they're gone. They don't even turn in a resignation. They just stop showing up to work. And this is a common theme.
We got a question from Skip Sims. Skip is one of the members of Spark and also runs an angel fund. So Skip, what's your comment and question?
Hey, Skip.
Hi, Rich. Great comments as always from you. We appreciate your engagement. The question or comment is about broadband. I enjoyed your comment earlier about you being on the beach at Lake Huron and using your phone. You're probably using the phone as a hotspot. It is shocking. It is shocking how how many people don't have broadband. And if you're working from home, that's critical. That's as important as electricity.
It is. It might be as important as oxygen, the fact matter is that when we sent everybody home in March, that was the first thing we had them do, was all of them check their bandwidth to make sure they have enough capacity. And if they don't, see if they can get it upgraded to the next level. And, fortunately for our team, for whatever reason, the places they live and that sort of thing, it worked out for everybody here. But there certainly are a lot of places that you and I both know, Skip, just in our region here, that do not have that kind of connectivity.
I mean, shocking. I mean, people will be shocked. In Washtenaw County, of all places, there are places that don't have broadband.
Yep.
Skip, how does the new legislation driven by the Biden administration change that? What do you see coming into the state?
Well, the infrastructure bill that passed included broadband. I mean, along with roads and bridges and ports and all the other and grid, broadband was included in that legislation in terms of what is to be funded with that money. And of course, it's going to be distributed to states for use. And any opportunity anybody has to talk to a legislator to make sure that broadband gets funded to the degree it needs to. I mean, anybody that has electric power to their home ought to have broadband to their home. And this bill, if we didn't have the money before, that's no longer an excuse. The money's there now.
Okay. Please raise your hand if you want to report out or ask a question from your group. Don't raise your hands all at once. Ken, you could go. We only are calling on people with gray hair today, so go ahead, buddy.
Well, first of all, thank you for pairing me with Steve Dion Leadership. We had not met before. It was great to be able to meet him. But I had posted a question earlier, and this is for you, Rich. How do you orient people? Probably nobody has had the kind of experience that they're going to have when they join your company. How do you orient them to this entirely new way of working? And is there a trial period for you and for them?
Yeah, this falls into a broader theme that I often talk about. And I think, Rob, we might have even shared an article I wrote on this subject, but
right.
If you haven't, maybe they're going to send it out afterwards. But I will tell you, Ken, the key thing is, if you want to be intentional about your culture inside your organization, I would advocate for that. Most companies are not intentional about their culture. They have the default culture. Who did we hire? What behaviors do we tolerate? What attitudes walked in the door? How do you want to work? You work however you want. We are very intentional about our culture, and I would say intentionally joyful about our culture. But if you don't then go back, if you say, hey, I have a cultural intention, here's what it is. If you don't go back and look at every single step of the traditional HR process, you will fail. How do you recruit? How do you interview? How do you select? How do you onboard? Onboarding in most organizations is like a corporate hazing ritual, right? I'm going to try and get you productive before I demoralize you. And that's a race you typically lose. How do you promote? How do you give feedback? And quite frankly, how do you fire? All of those steps should be aligned with your cultural intention as they are here. So for example, Ken, we have this very unusual interview process here. We do a group interview because we work as a group. We work as a team. So we interview as a team. We work in pairs, so we interview in pairs. We actually pair the candidates together. And then we give them the weirdest instructions they will ever hear in an interview, because we're not asking any questions. We are simply asking them to audition for us and demonstrate their kindergarten skills. And we give them the instructions that your job is to help the person sitting next to you, who's competing for the same position you are, help them get a second interview. Support the human being next to you. Make
Love
your
it.
peer partner look good.
Love it. So you bring in elements, not all sweet and lovely, but you also bring in the competition idea, which I think is important. John Avery, you have a question for Rich, which I think is a good one about not inside Menlo, but outside.
Yeah. Hey, Rich. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, John.
Introduce yourself, John.
Or not your daughter, one of your workers, I think it was. Yeah. So.
Yes, absolutely. So one thing that I've obviously been to your organization, enjoy what you've done. How do you introduce that to an organization? What do you suggest to an organization that says, "Hey, I want to take on this pairs concept, this working together, this change"? What's your recommendation or roadmap to make that happen?
You know, John, in my first book, I describe how I first introduced this construct in my old company, where I was a VP of R&D at Interface Systems out on the west side of Ann Arbor. We started very small. We started with just 2 people. We ran the experiment. We didn't know if it would make sense. I wasn't even sure that I could wrap my head around having 2 people share a keyboard and a mouse together. There was that angst inside of me, like, am I cutting productivity in half for some ethereal benefit? Will the people actually like it? That sort of thing. And paired 2 people for 3 weeks just to give them the experience, and the report out from them. Literally, one of the guys said, "I'm not sure you should pay me to work here anymore. This is so much fun. It doesn't feel like work." And the primary thing he said was, "We're getting so much done." And that was a really interesting construct. Now, it wasn't easy to change the culture in those days, but there were a lot of experiments we ran. And I would say, you cannot flip a switch tomorrow and say, "Hey, Rich said you should all pair together, so we're going to do that." Sort of like the open office environment. A lot of people, heard about open offices, and the next day they tore down all their walls and jammed everybody in a room together. And everybody hated it because they didn't even know their peers. They had no relationship with them. And now you're expecting me to work shoulder to shoulder with these people I don't even like. So there's a lot of things that have to happen. I would just simply say, run small experiments, start slow, see what works. Heck, pair on an email this morning. Have you ever sent an email where you wished you hadn't? Like yesterday? Grab somebody and say, "Hey, can you come look at this email? Can you help me word it better than I've worded it?"
Excellent. Thank you.
You bet.
I'm going to call on, let's see, is Matt Edgelooney still here? Matt, can you unmute? And this is Dr. Angelini, and he runs, well, you could say what you do, but I'd like to, from the future of the workplace, what's the future of medicine around this? What are you seeing in your introduce what you do, and maybe you can comment on that, Matt.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Hey, Rich. My name is Matt Edgelooney. I work at IHA in Ann Arbor, and I'm the division head for their urgent care program. We have 14 urgent cares that I help lead. And my purview is also beyond the urgent care because I sit on our board, and so we're struggling like every other healthcare organization and not just healthcare, to find and retain good staff. And we've had to close locations because we just simply don't have the support staff to open our sites. And so any pearls of wisdom that we can glean from what you're talking about is great. I don't know that this pairing thing, how that's applicable in our world, but a lot of the other concepts you've talked about are. I don't know, Rob, if you put me on the spot. I don't know if I have any.
I'll give you a fun story. In our earliest days, we, as Menlo, one of our biggest early projects was to rebuild the organ transplant information system at the University of Michigan Health System. Now, organ transplant is a very complex set of procedures, requires monitoring data for those patients for their lifetime, not just a specific window. And we used all these constructs. When the contract administrator found out we were pairing our people, she called me into her office and she said, I understand you have 2 people working on one computer. I want you to stop doing that. Why do you do that? And I said, well, the same reason your hospital does. She says, what do you mean? I said, well, my daughter just had pretty involved surgery. She'd broken her wrist clean through, and she had to have a series of surgeries. I said, every time we showed up, the doctor showed up and the pair doctor showed up. The pair nurse showed up, the pair anesthesiologist showed up. And she said, well, your daughter's life is at stake. That's why we do that. And I said, if we get the tissue type wrong in the organ transplant system, we'd kill the patient. That's why we do that. She never asked me another question about it again. But quite frankly, there are a tremendous number of examples of pairing in the healthcare environment that are commonplace. I mean, think about even paramedics. I mean, it's almost built into the name if you toy with the language just a little bit. You know, very seldom are emergency responders ever out on their own. They're usually paired with someone, or if they're not paired with someone, a pair partner will show up to help them. I always say when there are lives at stake, we are typically pairing people together. You know, firefighters, pilots of aircraft, parents of teenagers, whenever there's lives at stake, we should pair people together.
Very good. I'm going to shift a little bit because we just have a few minutes, and I know Rich has to break away right at 9 to fix a tooth, right, Rich? So this is the pleasure point. I hope you don't have too much pain when you go to the next.
No, I'm already past all the pain stuff. This is the late stages of it all, so it's fine.
The idea of one idea of positivity is when the pain stops. So hopefully that you'll be there. That's reinforcing.
Right.
So I have to switch to thanking some of our sponsors. Dave Whittinger. Dave, are you still on? Dave may be off, but he has office. Oh, there you are, David. He has office space. It's one of our sponsors over on great spot, Eisenhower and State. So David, you still have some openings in your office for people who might want to come in temporarily.
We do. It's I wouldn't miss a meeting with the title of the future of the office space. So
thanks, Dave. And then anybody from Bank of Ann Arbor still on? I guess they've checked out, but Bank of Ann Arbor, which is a great community spot, has been one of our sponsors, and also Zingerman's. We've held our experiences at Zingerman's for several years, probably 10 years, and we're hoping to get back there soon. I also want to, I might show this tape to my mother-in-law, who turns 99 today. So let's give her a hand here for a life well lived, and 99 and going strong toward 100. She's completely independent, living in a place where she could get, I guess it's called like senior living. So she stays in her apartment, but she's a marvel. So I'm going to promote one more time. We're going to do Michigan Leaders Read with the Chief Joy Officer. And we're going to come back in March and have a group discussion. Maybe we could pair people, Rich, ahead of time. Would that be a good idea?
Yeah, why not?
So we'll figure out how to pair you with another person. And we won't ask you if there's somebody that you don't want to be paired with, because they're all wonderful people and should work well together. So Rich, I'm going to let you have the closing remarks, and we'll let you get to the dentist. And I just want to say thank you as Leaders Connect. It's been going on for about 25 years. We were at the IT Zone with Skip earlier.
And Diane. Diane was there too.
Yeah. Diane's on board now. Hi, Diane. Diane may be, I don't see her, but.
Yeah, she's there. I see
all
her.
right. Want to say hi, Diane?
Certainly, huh? Yes, I love thinking back to the early days of IT Zone. And Rich, you were on the board, and Rob, you put on so many great programs there, and it's amazing that you have just continued so strong all these years and bringing people together and bringing forward the messages from different leaders. Just fantastic stuff. Thanks, Rob, and great to see you, Rich.
Rich, I want to add one other thing. I've been having some mobility problems because I have a nerve damage and foot drop. And I think that people over 70 or people who are disabled, working from home is a fantastic thing.
Yes.
And because it enables people who may not, for different reasons, be able to get to the workplace every day, to be able to continue their careers and continue to contribute. So that's another aspect of pairing, and they might be paired with a young person, which is fantastic. So Rich, we have about 3 minutes. You want to make any closing remarks?
Well, I think, Rob, we are probably in one of the most dynamic periods in business life that any of us have ever seen. I have personally felt more entrepreneurial in the last 18 months than I probably have in the previous 18 years. This is a time of change, big change. And I will tell you, this old brain had to rework itself, and it was pretty neat. I think one of the books you should highlight in the future is John Bacon's new book, Let Them Lead. And I found that construct worked really well for me. In the earliest days of the pandemic, when we got hit with all the changes we had to hit with, I watched the team lead me. And if we let our team members lead, if we reach into their hearts and minds, we will derive joy for ourselves as top leaders in our organization. I would encourage you to reach into the human energy of your team and figure out how to draw the joy out, just even for you. This can be, I will tell you, this has been a personally selfish journey for me. I wanted to build a company I wanted to come to work in every day. Just happened to be that a whole bunch of other people want to join me in that, which is delightful.
So